thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Kristi.
Cool. Thanks, Jody. And thanks to all you guys, Jody, Ricky, and Manny for organizing this. It's been a super fun day. I think even for veterans like me, I've learned some stuff and just got some gears turning from rad things that people have shown. So super cool. But let's get started. Click on my 2 to 4 slides here. I'm Kristi Brown. I am an analytics champion, just like so many of the rest of us, and just really a Salesforce junkie. I have 4 certifications in counting on an official architect journey, but I do function as an architect already at my job. I spend the majority of my time and the majority of the last 4.5-ish years in Einstein Analytics. So I started out the same way I'm sure a lot of you guys are starting it out. Based on the last few sessions we've heard, I started a new job, got handed this product, and they were like, figure it out. So that's what I've been doing. I didn't know anything about code, very little about data, and so I was super overwhelmed when I started. But I feel like the product and I have kind of grown up together in the last 4 or so years. And when I was starting out, I looked at SAQL like a foreign language. It was like backwards, upside down, pig Latin. I know the Spring ML team showed a little code snippet from that waterfall chart in the Sales Analytics app. That's crazy. I looked at that and was like, huh? So trying to understand what it was doing was like, ah. But once I figured out the basics, reading and writing it became easier. And with all the awesome upgrades to the analytics platform, there's really fewer and fewer reasons to even have to use SAQL. I still use it every day because I'm one of those bad developers who goes straight into SAQL now, because that's where I've been for the last 4.5 years instead of using all of the awesome UI things that they've built in. But maybe you inherited some older dashboards and need to update them and they're all written in SAQL. Or maybe you need to build a table where you're doing a lot of joining, or you have to group multiple times, or maybe you just want to do like a does not contain filter that you can't do in the UI. So even with all the declarative tools we have now, you're still going to have to use SAQL for something. And that's really overwhelming, and there's not a class for it. And I keep telling myself I'm going to write one, but I never do. And that brings us to today. So there's some basic pieces of syntax that all of your queries are going to have, and we're just going to focus on these today. This is super basic, more of an anatomy lesson, so you can better understand how some of these pieces fit together. So we're going to touch on some functions, on some keywords, and then review some recommendations on how you can move forward writing your own SAQL. So I'm going to get out of these slides and just jump into an org here. And I'm doing this just in the analytics enabled developer org. So anybody can get one of these if you don't have analytics already. And this just has the DTC trailhead data in it. So if anybody wanted to even follow along, you could. So first things first, every single query you write is going to start with loading data, and every query out of the box is going to load data. And that looks something like this. And maybe this looks straightforward, but maybe not. Like, what does queue mean? Who knows? So queue is just naming a stream. And every statement you make starts with identifying which stream it applies to. And I can actually name this anything. It could be anything as long as it doesn't have spaces. So, and I find that if I'm doing longer queries, it makes sense to give things more descriptive names instead of using letters. So if I'm going to have something that's maybe looking at invoices and accounts and opportunities, then you should just name your streams what they are or what they're doing. So I'm going to rename this opportunities or ops because I'm looking at ops. So now that we've figured out the letter Q here, let's move on to the word load. And the word load is just a keyword. It does just that. It tells the platform that you want to load some data. And we'll be talking about a few of these different keywords today. And then the next part says which data you want to load. And this is going to be the developer name of your data set. And then every statement is going to end with a semicolon. And this is just like a period at the end of a sentence. It's saying, I'm done with this statement and I want you to evaluate the next one now. So with these few words here, we've actually loaded an entire data set already, but the chances of us needing that whole thing are pretty slim. So we're going to apply some filters so that we're only working with the data that we need. And we're going to do this once again by naming the stream that our data is coming from. So we're going to say ops, and then we're going to say which fields we want to filter on and for which values. So this time we're going to use the keyword filter. Ops equals filter ops by, and now we want to say what field, and we're just going to keep this pretty simple. We're going to look at our stage. And remember, they've added this awesome field list here. So if you don't know what the stage is called, since we don't have autocomplete, you can just copy it from here just by clicking, copy the API name, just to make sure you have it right. That makes it really simple for the values in each of those as well. So we're going to filter stages, and we can do our filters in a lot of different ways. If I just want to filter on one value, I can say, I want to see where the stage equals, and let me pull the values for these because they're weird. So let's say we want prospecting. Oops. So this is saying, for all of the data in this data stream, I want to filter only rows that have the stage of prospecting. And I didn't put double quotes on that. And then I'm going to complete that with a semicolon. I could easily change this filter to be does not equal by adding an exclamation point here. You can also, just for fun, add the exclamation point at the front of this and put it in parentheses. So that also means does not equal. I can filter on more than one value by changing the syntax of this and changing it to in and adding some brackets here. And then we could add another value just in a comma separated list here. So now I'm saying for all of this data in this stream, find me all the rows that equal both of these stages. And I could easily change this to not in as well. So now I'm getting everything that does not equal these two stages. We can also do matches. Let me get rid of these. So if I didn't necessarily know the name of this stage, maybe I didn't know that it had been transformed with a 0, 1 for sorting. I'll spell that correctly. We can use this matches function that's basically does contain. It contains this. We could also use our exclamation point to do a does not contain. So lots of different ways to do filtering. We can also add more filters to this just using ands and ors. So I could say, I want to find all of the opportunities where stage contains prospecting and amount is greater than 0. I could also add some logic to this and say, let's add some parentheses, my amount is greater than 0, or my probability is less than 90. I don't know why you would do that, but that's an example. So now I've added filter logic, just like you would in a Salesforce report. I'm saying, give me everything that matches 1 and 2 or 3. So lots of different ways you can apply filters here. And I'm just going to get rid of this stuff because who knows if it'll give us results. And we'll just put it back on this one. Okay, so that takes care of filtering. You could also add filters in other statements as well. So instead of doing ands and ors in one statement, I could add another filter here the same way. And let's say maybe billing country. Billing country equals United States, something like that. So I keep not doing double quotes. So this means the same thing. It's just this and this. I think that best practice maybe if I have a ton of filters, then I will usually put them one statement after the other instead of all together, just because they're easier to identify and edit if necessary. If it's just a few things, it can all be in one statement. And of course, remember, if you're finding that you're applying like 10 filters every time, then you should just evaluate your data set and maybe you pre-filter your data. And I think my headset cut out, hopefully not for very long. What I said when it cut out was, if you find that you're applying lots of filters all the time consistently, then evaluate your data sets, moving those filters into the data flow so that you don't have to do that every time. So now we've filtered our data. Our next step is grouping. And you don't have to group your data, but more often than not, I find we do. And you can think of this in terms of a standard Salesforce report. If you don't group your data set, you have a tabular report, just a big table with rows and columns. If you do group your data, then you have a summary or a matrix style report. So in our example, we're looking at these stages. Actually, let me add another stage so it's more interesting when we pull our data in. I don't remember what it was called. Here. Okay, so now we're filtering on 2 stages. So now we want to group our data by stage to see what we have in each of those stages. So again, and you can see the syntax continuing here, we name our stream, we name our function, and then we say what we want it to do. In this case, we're going to group this stream by stage. So we're sticking with that. And then we end our statement. You can also group by more than one stage. And honestly, you could fill probably 10 sessions with just things about grouping. And we'll do another grouping example after this. But just to quickly show how you would group by more than one thing, you would just add parentheses and then have billing country in here already. Perfect. So the syntax for grouping by more than one thing, you just add parentheses and then your comma separated list. Perfect. So if we try to run this now, there's still nothing for us to run. Oh, and I didn't remove that when I wanted to remove it. So it says found no query to run. And that's because we haven't told it what we want to produce yet. We haven't told it what we want to project. And you do that in a for each statement. And you're going to tell the platform which data points you want to return. So in keeping with this opportunity example, again, we're going to name our stream. Our function this time is going to be foreach. Foreach ups, generate, and then now we're going to tell it which columns do we want to return. So we want to return our stage, and then just some simple aggregate functions we could do the count of rows. So this is going to give us just that, how many records we're returning. And you'll notice that I'm putting in as, and this is just naming those variables as we project them. So it's going to be the column headers. So we're going to say this is number of ops. And you'll notice I'm also putting underscores in here, and that just formats our numbers. And I'll show you what that looks like if you don't put that. And then let's also do a sum of amount. And we'll call that value ops. Perfect. So we've loaded our data, we've filtered it, we've grouped it by stage, and so now we expect to get these 2 stages with the number of ops and the amount. So if I've spelled everything correctly, ta-da. So with just a few things, we've rebuilt a very simple query using SAQL, and applying these same few things in different ways will give us different results. Let me show you real quick. So if I remove this underscore and just do a space instead, you'll notice, oh, well, those are whole numbers here. It removes all the commas and stuff. So especially if you're doing percentages, you'll have like 900 decimal points after your numbers. So it's good to keep underscores especially if you don't want to have to go format everything after the fact. So this is one stream of data with a very simple example. Let's see what we can do differently with our groups by creating two streams of data. So very simply, get some space here. So let's say, I think maybe a common use case with this would be, I want to see by billing country, how many closed won opportunities do we have versus how many closed lost opportunities do we have. So we don't have to load all of this twice to get those numbers. We just need to break up our streams and then rejoin them. So that's what we're gonna do. So let's make this stream 1. So now we're creating a new stream, but we're still saying that we want to filter the data that's coming out of this data set. And let's make this 1. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this. And we'll call this lost. And that is 09. Okay, so now we've created 2 new streams of data. So we have 3 streams of data here. We have our initial stream where we've loaded the data, and then we're filtering that same data 2 different ways, a won and a lost. So now we need to regroup those together. So let's rename this results. And you'll notice that this is the same syntax that you would see if you were building a compare table. That's essentially what we're doing. So we'll keep with the same naming convention and call it results. And now we're going to group 1 by, we wanted to say billing country, and lost by billing country. So now we're saying that this new stream that we're creating, we're basically appending these 2 streams together, grouping them by billing country. We're going to do results again because we're keeping with this same stream. And we're going to say for each results, we're going to generate, not that. And now we need to name the stream where this data is coming from. So, and we want only 1 billing country column. So I'm going to do a coalesce, and we'll say, name our stream 1 dot billing country, and we want that to be the same as, oops, lost dot billing country, and we're just going to name all of that billing country. And this is just going to find null values and replace them with the same thing. We have 1 column. Okay, and then let's just do the count for each. So we can keep the count aggregate function that we have here, but then we need to name the stream. And so we'll just put it right inside the parentheses like that. And this is going to be 1 ops, and then we'll do the same count here for lost and rename that lost ops. So now, just to recap, we've taken that 1 stream of data, split it into 2, a closed lost, a 1 bucket and a closed lost bucket, and then we've stuck them back together. And so we'll have 1 table with both of those 2 streams. So here for each billing country, we have the won and the lost. So just changing the syntax very slightly, we've been able to do a completely different thing. How are we doing on time here? We're good. So.
Yeah, you have 9 minutes.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about practicing. I think the way that I learned, and the best thing that you can do to learn SAQL is to create something declaratively and then click the SAQL button to look at what that translates to in the code. So every lens is going to generate and execute SAQL in the background, so you just have to click the button. So don't be afraid to put a lens together, do the most complicated compare table you can think of, and then click that SAQL button and see what it looks like. You know, how does the syntax change if I apply this filter or this filter, or if I group by 4 things, what does that look like? Just play around and see what you can see. And I know documentation is super duper boring, but this SAQL reference guide is a lifesaver. My headset keeps cutting out. The SAQL reference guide is a lifesaver, and you don't have to memorize everything about everything because it's all right here. I open this probably every day, mostly for date functions, but really everything that you'll need is in here waiting for you to Google it. So you don't have to know everything as long as you know where to find it. And you know, I can write SAQL in my sleep, but it wasn't always like that. I Google everything. I use this SAQL reference. I copy and paste a lot. Actually, you might have seen I have this little plugin here that saves like the last 500 things that I've copied to my clipboard. It's called Ditto. I highly recommend it. It comes in really handy in analytics just because I'm copying and pasting stuff all the time. But I just have pages and pages full of syntax that I've used for various projects. And I just reuse it all the time because why memorize everything if it's sitting somewhere? So, and then a little bit of self-promotion. I write this Force for Fun blog. Well, I mostly do. I haven't written on it in a long time, but I did start the SAQL as a second language series where I go over a lot of the stuff that we just did plus more, and there's fun GIFs, so it's totally worth reading, obviously. But yeah, here's this slide. I love helping people learn and love answering questions. So shoot me a message on LinkedIn, or Twitter is probably more reliable because I only looked at LinkedIn like once a week. Check out my blog, send me an email, whatever you want.
Thanks, Kristi. We have one question in the chat for you. So what are the most common use cases where you still need to write code?
For everything in my org. I find that I'm always creating very large tables of data where I'm joining things and regrouping and doing windowing functions, and so I'm in the SAQL a lot. I think now with all the declarative tools that we have, you would probably need to only go into the SAQL maybe if you're going to be applying a lot of bindings, if you have a lot of static queries that you're referencing. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like you shouldn't have to go in the SAQL for anything these days.
So we do have another 2 questions. What are some trade-offs in filtering and general usability by going the SAQL way instead of using the UI?
For filterability, it would just be being mindful of how you're naming your variables. So if I'm going to name my sum of amount, you know, I named this field or something, then you need to make sure that you're connecting that back in your data connections just for faceting reasons. I think that you actually get more flexibility when you're using SAQL in terms of filtering, just because you can apply bindings wherever you need them. So say people have talked about converting currency a lot. So if you have a static query where you have your lists of currencies, then you can use that and bind to append like _USD or _EUR to all of your field names in your SAQL query, which changes them, changes the symbols and everything. So I feel like SAQL gives you more flexibility, which is why I turn to it often and why they keep adding more functions to it instead of taking them away, I think.
One more question. Do you use the comment feature?
I do. I try to always comment my code, and you can do that just by doing this. So you'll notice that turned light green. So 2 hyphens in a row will comment a line. And you can do that for explaining your code, like, you know, this is what we're doing now so that people who are coming into your queries understand what you're doing. I've also found that commenting is good sometimes when I need to like inject certain code snippets from another query using a list toggle or something. I can choose to comment out or add when needed. So commenting is super useful, yeah.
Great. Okay, so we've come to the end of our questions. Again, if you think of something in the middle of the night that you really want to ask Kristi about, feel free to pop it into Slack. I know that most of our speakers will be checking Slack even after we're done with the event. And with that, we're at the end of our session. So I don't know if Manny and Ricky wanted to pop on, but I wanted to thank everybody for attending today and making it such a success.